Practice debate allows the students to simulate what goes on in an actual debate round, which is a little bit harder than you would think in that the conditions of the tournament are very different. So practicing is very important because it allows them to see and practice all the things that they've learned, including the speech order, working with a partner, preparation, organization, etc. The things that you learn in debate can ultimately be overwhelming because there's a lot of information, and it's not something like baseball or soccer or football that you've seen on TV before and have at least some idea that's going on. A way to make that not overwhelming in a practice debate is just to narrow down what you're doing. So make the topic very narrow. Tell the teams that to make 5 arguments instead of 50 arguments. Maybe exclude evidence in the beginning, not so much as to defer learning about what's in the evidence, but to get them comfortable with debating first, and then they can become a lot more comfortable with reading the evidence and using the evidence to make those arguments.
I think there's certainly value in teaching students what the context of an argument is, i.e. I don't necessarily have to read evidence to make an argument. Arguments have certain components: assertion, reasoning, evidence. A Spar debate would be a debate in which they are not required to introduce researched evidence into the debate. Ultimately, I think people can argue about anything: Coke versus Pepsi, McDonald's versus Burger King, merits of health care. We can get into more complex political issues, but at the very basic level, ultimately, no matter what the format is, if we're having a debate, there are certain things that go on. Whether that involves read evidence or not doesn't mean students can't come up with examples or historical facts or things that are constitutive of evidence. And so a Spar debate is an attempt to introduce people to the process of argument. I think it's particularly useful for beginners who don't understand why they need to read a book in a debate to have a debate. They think, well, couldn't we argue over something without that? And so I think a Spar debate functionally is you give them a topic that is familiar and teach them how to make arguments around that topic, and then use that as a starting point for moving on to more complex political issues, and then introducing a lot of the jargon and the processes and the format that are involved in policy debate. I think for beginners it's very useful because it can get them excited about making arguments.
You know, if they're very nervous, then even just like having them write a persuasive speech about a topic they care about, and it could be something like intellectual, it could just be something that has to do with pop culture, just something that, you know, matters to them, so just so that they get in the habit of speaking and thinking, and you know, you can ask them questions about it to sort of build in the cross-ex component.
Well, when I do one-on-one debates, I generally decide to just do a portion of a debate. So usually that will mean a first negative constructive, just a disadvantage and a topicality argument, for example, and the second affirmative constructive will be responding to those arguments, and then the second negative constructive for those arguments as well. So, and it depends on the level of debater. Sometimes I put in time limits if they're more advanced debaters, but if they're relatively new starting debaters, or it's early in the season before the first tournament and I just want them to become familiar with the arguments that they are going to be making, I don't put time limits on them. I just say, look, just do this, and then, you know, in a couple weeks we'll start getting into a more formal arrangement. It doesn't matter what speaker position the debater necessarily does during a normal tournament, because the point of a mini debate with only 2 people is that they become familiar with their arguments and that they really take ownership of the subject material. So for me, the concern is not necessarily time limits, it's more that they spend sort of quality time engaging in debate arguments in whatever way that plays out.
I think the key trick, in my opinion, is to have them on a regular basis so they become a natural routine for the students. I think they take them a little more seriously if it seems like it's not a unique event that they're just sort of giggling through, but something they need to look forward to and need to get ready for.
Practice debates can have as many as 4 people, 2 people, and 15 people involved or more. One way to get everyone involved, I've found, is to separate the class or the group or the team into 2 equal groups. So if you have 14 people, you put 7 people on each side, and you let everyone know that everyone needs to be involved in this debate because everyone has the potential to participate in it. And the way you keep that potential there is you let the opposing team select who's going to give the speech from the other team. So that keeps people on their toes. People that think that they might be perceived as weak or whatever are going to be working a lot harder to catch up with the rest. They're going to be paying attention to those in the group that are stronger. The stronger members in the group ultimately function as almost coaches for the people that aren't as comfortable with debating. During the constructives, you usually allow the teams to select the debater from the other team to debate, but then the rebuttals, I like to allow the teams to pick someone from their own group to kind of give them a little bit more autonomy.
And we have to remember that at every moment that debate activities are occurring, that is a learning opportunity for every other student in the room. So as a teacher, you need to make sure that every debater in the room is taking notes. They're flowing. You need to give them pointers as the speech is going through. For example, new debaters that are just learning how to flow a debate have lots of difficulties. They tend to write words that are very long. They tend to not know how to abbreviate. So as a teacher, you can go around and sort of point out small different things that they can do during that process. Have audience questions. Obviously, in a regular debate, the only people who ask questions during cross-examination are the debaters. But in a practice setting with a class, add on an extra minute. The class just asks questions. Maybe it's just clarification, but it can be a useful way to go about things. And then another thing is to have class judging. So the entire class at the end has to vote, and then each debater in the class would have to justify their vote. And a lot of times there's time constraints, so you can't have every student explain why they voted, but they could at least write out a paragraph and then turn it into the debate teacher at the end of the class.
A lot of times when you're debating, you get very one-sided and you look at the debate from your side and you miss something that's important that's coming from the other side. And as a judge, you're supposed to be impartial, so practicing that mindset kind of creates a whole world debate view that you don't get as easily from just debating yourself in those debates.